I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped back from the bank of monitors, surveying the clarity of the images now streaming from every corner of my home. The power surge from last week had rendered the cameras useless, turning what should have been a reliable safety system into silent decoration. 3 hours of meticulous rewiring, checking audio feeds, and adjusting angles had restored them to perfection. Every lens captured crisp detail. Every microphone picked up even the softest sound. I sank into my favorite chair, letting my eyes drift over the familiar rooms of the house I had built with my own hands. Memories of raising Lila alone after her father passed crowded my mind, the scraped knees I had bandaged, the late nights I stayed awake comforting her fears, the milestones I had quietly celebrated when she thought I wasn't watching. This house was more than wood and brick. It was the repository of a lifetime of care and sacrifice. I realized, with a brief pang of unease, that in my satisfaction, I had forgotten to tell Lila the cameras were working again. It was a small oversight, but in my line of work, small oversights could prove significant. Over the past few weeks, subtle things had caught my attention, the way Lila asked pointed questions about insurance updates, Daniel's casual curiosity about household valuables. At the time, I brushed it off as mundane interest. But now, with the cameras restored, I had a new vantage point, one I had unintentionally withheld. The house hummed quietly around me, the soft whir of fans and the distant ticking of the wall clock marking time. I knew that tomorrow I would have to see what the cameras revealed. The morning light through the living room windows glinted off the polished wood floors as I finished my coffee, already anticipating the first test of the system's full capabilities. The sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway signaled their arrival. I straightened my apron and set down the last dish, listening as the front door opened and Lila's familiar voice called a cheerful greeting. Daniel's calm, measured tone followed, but something in his cadence felt slightly off, practiced. When I opened the door, their smiles were in place, perfectly rehearsed, almost too polite, but my gut told me there was more beneath the surface. Lila stepped forward first, her hand brushing mine in a gesture of warmth. "Hi, Mom. The house looks great," she said, but there was a subtle edge to her words, a hint of calculation in her gaze. Daniel nodded, his eyes avoiding mine, and I noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. We exchanged brief pleasantries before moving inside, the aroma of dinner filling the air. Once seated at the table, Lila began steering the conversation toward matters I had not anticipated. "Mom, have you thought about updating your insurance? Property values in this neighborhood have risen a lot. It might be worth reviewing your policy," she said, her tone casual, but precise, almost measuring my reactions. Daniel added nothing, only shifting in his chair, eyes occasionally flicking toward the corners of the room, as if noting details I could not see. I answered carefully, masking the unease that began to stir within me. As the conversation continued, I noticed other inconsistencies, minor contradictions in Daniel's story about his work schedule. A fleeting hesitation when Lila asked about recent home renovations. Subtle signals that suggested this was not merely curiosity. My years of observation and experience gave me the sense that their smiles and questions were performing a role, hiding intentions I was not yet able to name. Dinner progressed, the rhythm of the evening outwardly normal, but beneath the surface, tension coiled tightly. I served the pot roast while my mind catalogued every glance, every pause, every calculated phrase. It was clear that tonight's visit was more than a routine meal, and I would have to watch carefully to uncover why. Tomorrow morning, I would see the full picture through the restored cameras, and everything hidden would begin to reveal itself. Chapter 3. The Morning Revelation. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds as I settled into the chair before my bank of monitors. A fresh cup of coffee steaming at my side. The house was quiet. The only sound the faint hum of the security system now operating flawlessly. I had planned to run a routine check of the cameras, a simple verification that all angles and audio feeds were functioning after yesterday's repairs. As the footage flickered to life, my eyes immediately caught movement in the living room. Lila and Daniel were not just sitting. They were bent over a stack of papers and folders on the coffee table, their gestures deliberate and hushed. My heart tightened. At first, I struggled to make sense of it, thinking perhaps they were discussing something mundane: bills, schedules, plans for an upcoming event, but the intensity of their focus, the whispered tones, suggested otherwise. Slowly, it became clear. They were coordinating something far more sinister. Daniel pointed to specific sections of a folder, nodding toward areas of the house I had only just secured with cameras. Lila's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes flicked toward the basement stairs and then back to Daniel as if confirming a plan. Every movement was precise, calculated, and deliberate. A cold realization settled over me. They were planning a staged accident, using the basement stairs as a trap to make harm look accidental, all for financial gain. The sum of the insurance and the value of the house, carefully discussed in their hushed conversation, made the intention unmistakable. The shock hit me with full force. Not only was I being betrayed, but the people I had trusted the most, the daughter I had raised, and her husband were actively plotting against me. Fear mingled with disbelief, and my chest felt tight. I had imagined disagreements and minor betrayals, perhaps secrets or deceptions, but never a plan designed to put my life at risk. The quiet confidence in their movements, the meticulous nature of their preparation, deepened the ache of betrayal. I leaned back, hands trembling slightly over the keyboard, replaying snippets to ensure I had understood correctly. Every instinct I had honed over decades told me this was real, and urgent action would be required. The weight of their intent pressed down on me. And yet, somewhere beneath the fear, a sense of resolve began to take shape. I knew the first step was to gather evidence carefully, to understand the full scope of what they were planning, and to prepare. The cameras, once forgotten, had become my shield and my window into a dangerous truth. Tomorrow, I would begin to formulate a plan to counter them, and nothing in the house would be left unmonitored. I spent the morning reviewing every angle of the footage, pausing, rewinding, and scrutinizing each movement. The documents Lila and Daniel had spread across the coffee table were not casual papers. They were blueprints for a meticulously orchestrated plan. I watched Daniel trace a path from the basement stairs to the kitchen, pointing at potential obstacles, while Lila nodded, her face carefully neutral, though her fingers trembled ever so slightly as she arranged the folders. That brief flicker of hesitation struck me an almost imperceptible moment where doubt or fear had shown itself. The full picture became horrifyingly clear. They intended to stage an accident, a fall down the basement stairs, timed and positioned to look fatal. The cameras, the shadows of the staircase, even the placement of loose rugs, all were part of their preparation. Their goal was the insurance payout, the house value, everything calculated with cold precision. My heart pounded in disbelief. The people I had trusted most, the daughter I had raised, and her husband were planning my death as though I were no more than an object to be discarded. Anger and grief surged together. Memories of bedtime stories, scraped knees, whispered worries, none of it could reconcile with what I was seeing. And yet, in the way Lila paused when Daniel gave instructions, I saw a subtle conflict. She wasn't entirely at ease. Her hesitation hinted that she understood, at some level, the immorality of what they were plotting. That small trace of humanity offered a thread of understanding, though it did nothing to lessen the danger. I cataloged every detail: the timing, the suggested delay in calling for help, the careful coordination to make the scene look authentic. Each layer of planning revealed their intent, and the stakes became terrifyingly real. I leaned back in my chair, eyes scanning the monitors, trying to absorb the weight of what had been entrusted to me by birth and circumstance, the life I had built, now threatened by those I loved. I realized that this was no longer merely about observing. It was about preparing, calculating my own next steps to survive. By evening, I began outlining how I would counteract their plan and reclaim control over the house and my life, ensuring that nothing would happen as they intended. I spent the afternoon moving through the house with deliberate purpose, placing additional cameras in corners that Lila and Daniel had overlooked. Small, inconspicuous lenses nestled along ceiling beams and behind shelves captured angles they assumed were blind spots. Each camera fed into a secure cloud backup, ensuring that even if something were tampered with, the evidence would survive. Hidden microphones picked up the faintest sound, every whispered word, every footstep in rooms they thought they controlled. While arranging the devices, I began documenting each discovery: the way Daniel consistently glanced at certain corners, the rhythm of their conversation. The papers they had handled these patterns revealed cracks in their coordination. Lila's fleeting hesitation, her fingers lingering on a folder longer than necessary, betrayed uncertainty. These small mistakes became crucial clues, breadcrumbs I could use to anticipate their next move. I called the private investigator I had worked with years ago, explaining the situation in careful terms. He understood immediately and agreed to verify the surveillance legally and observe discreetly. Together, we discussed safeguards, ensuring that if I had to take action before law enforcement could intervene, the plan would still be supported by evidence admissible in court. Every precaution mattered. One misstep could allow them to turn the house and my life into a trap. My mind raced as I balanced the technical preparations with the emotional weight of the situation. How had it come to this? How could the people I loved most, the daughter I raised, the man who had married into our family plan to harm me? The realization sharpened my focus. I could not afford hesitation. By nightfall, every camera angle had been tested, every microphone calibrated, and every backup secured. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a fortress of observation and strategy. Each small error Lila and Daniel had made was cataloged and ready to be leveraged, a thread I could pull to unravel their plan. Tomorrow, they would return. Unaware that their scheme was no longer hidden, I could wait. But I knew that waiting was only part of the plan. Every move I made now would determine whether I survived the next day. The sound of the car pulling into the driveway was both ordinary and charged with tension. I straightened the table settings and took a deep breath. Knowing Lila and Daniel had no idea the cameras were operational, their smiles were bright, practiced, and entirely unaware that every movement, every word, would be recorded in perfect clarity. They stepped inside, exchanging pleasantries that sounded casual but carried a subtle weight. Lila's questions drifted again toward insurance updates and home maintenance, her tone light yet probing. Daniel answered briefly, eyes flicking toward the basement as though confirming something with invisible signals. I noticed the synchronization in their gestures, the way they shifted papers and glanced at corners they believed they were invisible. I responded with measured calm, allowing them to steer the conversation while I observed and cataloged. Every hesitation, every micro-expression became part of a map I was constructing in real time. Their confidence was palpable, their movements precise, yet in their certainty lay their vulnerability. I could see the cracks, the small errors, the fleeting looks of doubt, the way Lila's hand lingered on a folder for just a moment too long. Dinner proceeded with ordinary rhythm. I served the food, kept my voice steady, and allowed the facade of normalcy to maintain their comfort. Behind the polite exchanges, I analyzed, timed, and prepared. Each sentence they spoke, each glance they exchanged, added to the blueprint of their plan, and my understanding of it. By the time coffee was served, I had compiled a clear picture of their intentions and noted every opportunity to intercept. Their confidence remained unshaken, blind to the fact that the house I had built was now a controlled environment, with every angle watched and every step accounted for. Tomorrow, I would begin the confrontation, and the careful control I had cultivated would turn their overconfidence into their undoing. I sat before the monitors, eyes scanning every frame of the footage one more time. The plan was unmistakable. Lila and Daniel intended to make an accident look like a natural misstep down the basement stairs. Their voices, once comforting and familiar, now carried the weight of calculated deception. I noted the timing, the placement of obstacles, and the meticulous choreography meant to ensure the scene appeared credible. Lila's hesitation was brief, a fraction of a second, when her hand lingered over a folder and her eyes met Daniel's, as if questioning the morality of what they were doing. That tiny flicker of doubt did not absolve her, but it confirmed that even the most devoted facade could not mask inner conflict entirely. I allowed myself to acknowledge it, storing it in memory while keeping my focus on the task at hand. I moved deliberately through the house, ensuring every camera angle was secured, every microphone capturing sound, and every backup recording ready for immediate retrieval. The cloud system was active, and I had duplicated the files in multiple locations, guaranteeing that no evidence could be destroyed or altered. Every detail from the footage, the papers, the gestures, the whispered directions was carefully cataloged and time-stamped. Next, I contacted the private investigator I trusted. I relayed what I had observed, providing timestamps and critical clips. He confirmed that everything was documented legally and would be admissible, no matter how Lila and Daniel tried to manipulate the narrative. We discussed contingency plans and ensured that law enforcement would be ready once the trap was set in motion. I traced their anticipated path through the house, noting where they would believe themselves unseen and marking the areas I would monitor most closely. Every motion, every step, had a consequence. Their overconfidence had become my advantage, and now I was prepared to turn their assumptions against them. The weight of what I had discovered pressed down, yet a sense of control settled over me. Fear remained, but it was tempered by strategy and preparation. I understood the stakes high, personal, and immediate, but I also knew that foresight and vigilance could prevail. Tomorrow, they would move as they intended. Believing they were in control, I would be ready, and nothing in the house would unfold as they expected. The door opened, and they stepped inside with the casual confidence of people certain the house was theirs to manipulate. Lila carried her usual polite smile. Daniel followed with measured ease, neither aware that every movement, every whisper, was being captured and recorded. They believed the cameras were still down, the shadows of the house giving them freedom. I stayed in the living room, calm and deliberate, while watching the monitors. Every step they took matched the pattern I had anticipated. Their plan, rehearsed and precise, moved forward exactly as the footage had predicted. I could almost hear the unspoken coordination between them, their confidence palpable, their guard completely lowered. The moment arrived. I triggered the system I had prepared: discreet alerts to law enforcement, secure transmission of the recordings, and legal documentation ready to prevent interference. Within minutes, the tactical team was on site, moving with quiet efficiency. The sound of authoritative voices and the sudden appearance of uniformed officers shattered the illusion of control. Lila froze mid-step, her practiced smile faltering. Daniel's confident posture collapsed into disbelief and panic. I watched them in real time, the monitors showing every reaction, every gesture. Their overconfidence, the very thing that had guided their plan, became their undoing. I felt a strange mix of fear and triumph, grief mingling with relief. The people I had trusted, whose betrayal cut deeper than any stranger could, were finally facing the consequences of their actions. The house, once the stage of a potential disaster, had become the instrument of justice. Every careful preparation, every detail I had anticipated, ensured the plan unfolded in my favor. The monitors displayed the scene with absolute clarity, confirming that the trap I had set had worked flawlessly. Tomorrow, the aftermath would begin, and the full weight of what had happened would settle into place. By the following morning, the house was quiet. The tactical team had cleared the scene, and Lila and Daniel were in custody, facing legal scrutiny for their actions. I sat in the living room, the hum of the security system the only sound, and let myself exhale for the first time in days. Relief mingled with sorrow, an odd combination that weighed heavier than I expected. The people I had trusted most, the daughter I had raised, had betrayed me in a way that left scars deeper than any physical wound. I moved slowly through the rooms, touching familiar surfaces, the life I had built now tempered by caution and experience. I thought of the countless nights I had stayed awake, worrying over Lila, hoping I was guiding her toward good decisions. The realization that those intentions had been met with manipulation and deceit cut sharply, yet I could not linger on anger alone. The ordeal had taught me lessons I had always known in theory, but never experienced so intimately. Vigilance was not optional, it was survival. Moral boundaries were critical, and naivety could no longer be a shield. I understood now that trust must be earned continually and maintained carefully, even within a family. As I reviewed the evidence one last time, saving copies for legal and personal security, I reflected on how fragile relationships could be and how easily intentions could be misread or exploited. The betrayal would leave a permanent mark, but it also solidified my resolve to protect myself and my home. The cameras, once a forgotten tool, had become my safeguard, and the experience had transformed my perspective on control, observation, and preparedness. I had survived not by chance, but through foresight, skill, and measured action. Tomorrow, the work of rebuilding both trust and a sense of security would continue, and I would take the lessons learned into a future defined by vigilance and resilience. Weeks passed, and the house settled into a rhythm of quiet security. I upgraded the remaining cameras, reinforced doors, and installed additional motion sensors, ensuring no corner could be exploited again. The experience had sharpened my awareness. Every detail mattered, and I approached each improvement with the precision I had learned over decades of work. Word of what had happened spread through the neighborhood, and soon, neighbors and local friends began asking for guidance. I shared my knowledge about home security, how to recognize subtle warning signs, and steps to protect assets and well-being. The trauma I had endured became a tool, transforming fear into action, uncertainty into preparation. I became an advocate, not just for myself, but for others who might face similar threats. Each day brought a sense of control I had not felt in weeks. The betrayal lingered in memory, but it no longer dictated my emotions. I felt empowered by my ability to foresee danger, to act decisively, and to reclaim both my home and my life. Independence and peace were no longer abstract ideas, they were the result of skill, vigilance, and determination. As I closed the final backup files and reviewed the cameras one last time, I reflected on the lessons the ordeal had taught me. Preparation and foresight could protect against even the closest betrayals, and knowledge was the ultimate safeguard. I had survived. But more than survival, I had learned to turn experience into resilience and purpose. Tomorrow would continue with community workshops and teaching neighbors to watch, anticipate, and protect, ensuring that the lessons I had learned would benefit more than just myself.